welcome. Today is very special because I have a special guest with me today, John El-Mokadem. And I first met John doing Michael Neal's Creating the Impossible. And he was on one of the guest calls, and so much wisdom and so much just depth of feeling when he was talking that I just knew that I had to have him on one of these calls to kind of pick his brain a bit more and really kind of expose you to his wealth of understanding. So I'm very, very excited to have John here. So thank you, John, for taking the time to come on and talk to us
Oh,
about
no
stuff.
problem. And no pressure, huh?
Yeah, no pressure. No, thanks.
No, it's nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Yeah, so I know that, so tell us a bit about kind of how you came across the principle, how you, came across this understanding and the work that you do.
Mm. So I work as a breakthrough coach, and my work is about using this understanding we call the principles to help people in areas where they're basically stuck. And I have a particular kind of affinity of working with people with chronic fatigue syndrome because it is something that it had affected me greatly over a 7-year period between 2007 and 2014. And it was whilst I was doing an apprenticeship with Michael Neal that I sort of started to connect the dots between what had been going on with me physically and a greater understanding of these principles. And I started to see that there was a really strong connection between how I interacted with my mind and how I understood life and what that did to my body. And how it started to create symptoms and created the whole sort of pathology that I had lived in for so long. And it was really when I started to see more about this that the whole kind of house of cards started to fall apart, and I started to recover and get better. So that's kind of what started it.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating what you said about you kind of realized that the mind was creating symptoms and kind of that there was this mind-body connection between what was, I'm sure, very physical and very, very visceral, very in your experience. And then to have somebody say, hey, you should kind of look in the direction of the mind. And I'm sure at first you were like, what does the mind have anything to do about it?
Well, yeah, and I had spent sort of 7 years believing that there was some kind of organic process going on, and it was very physical what I had experienced. Weird and wonderful, spectacular symptoms all over the place that didn't seem to be connected. They seemed to be very variable. So I thought there must be something underneath it all. And the way it looked to me was that this whole thing had been kicked off by a viral infection. So there was a very distinct point in 2007 where I clearly had some kind of infectious process that was going on. And so in my mind, this had been kicked off by an infection. And it was like that had started the process and I'd never quite got better from it. So the possibility that this was something that was not actually being caused by some kind of organic process really seemed alien to me. And I remember having this conversation with Michael at the time when I was doing my apprenticeship. And I'd been suffering from heat intolerance and sensitivity to the sun. And I talked to him about it. And he said, well, his first answer was, maybe you're a vampire. Which mildly amusing. And then the second thing he said to me was, maybe this is the power of thought to create your experience. To which I think I swore at him.
Yes.
Yeah, because it really sounded to me like what I'd heard so many people say. I mean, when I think about my experience with this sort of being in this illness, so many times I had batteries of tests thrown at me. And, at some point I remember distinctly talking to a doctor about feeling dizzy. And then they said, well, we're going to send you to see a psychotherapist. I was like, why are you sending me to see a therapist when I'm dizzy? I didn't get the connection. And so when Michael said this to me and he said, well, maybe this is the power of thought to create your experience, I was like, it was like the same thing. It was like, someone was telling me I'm making it up, or it's not true that I've got the physical symptom. Therefore, I need someone to convince me that somehow, I'm making it up and then it'll go away. That
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't my experience. It was a very real and physical symptom.
Mm-hmm.
And I find this with a lot of the people that, that I've shared my own experience with, is that they've had the same too, and that they don't understand why they're being directed towards what's going on in their mind and what's happening in their mind as a means of sorting out something that looks pathological and physical. Doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the work that I have to do with the clients that I work with is actually help them understand that link. Because it was only really when I started to see what was, I remember, if it's helpful, I can talk about it. But I remember going to see a functional medicine doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and he, as usual, did a whole battery of tests on me. And one of the results that I got back was that my cortisol level was really high. And I was asking, well, what does cortisol do? He said, oh, well, cortisol is your stress hormone. And I was like, well, what am I stressed about? Because I didn't really have what looked to be a stressful life. I wasn't fighting for survival in some way, but yet I actually was, because I used to spend hours and hours and hours in my head working out, how am I going to plan my life to avoid sunlight exposure, and what will I do if it's hot, or what if I have an episode where I get dizzy and have a severe headache, and so that all of this was going on all the time, and feeding this idea that there's something wrong with me and that's something I've got to do to be okay. Well, all of that was creating a fight or flight response on my body. And that has an effect on the body physiologically. When the body's in that fight or flight mode, actually the body's being broken down, is my understanding. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and your hormones get a different expression, and your digestion doesn't work as effectively. So you start to manifest all these symptoms, and yet you don't really know why. And it's because we don't understand the link between those two things.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah, no, I think that's great because that's kind of what it looks like to me because I used to suffer from migraines for over a decade and doctors
right.
didn't know what was wrong with me. So I
Mhm.
would go in for tests and they'd say, well, you can try changing your diet or you can try, they basically prescribed me these heavy duty pain meds to take. They're like, you can take these and you get a migraine. Other than that, we can't help you. Sorry. And
Mhm.
this was over 10 years that I just kind of, and as it progressed, it made me more and more anxious because I was already anxious at the time. I have been had been chronically anxious from about age, I don't know, 11, 12 to when I came across these principles at 23.
Mm.
And I know that that whole time I was getting migraines and doctors didn't know what it was. So it started to really have an impact on my life where I would worry, well, what if I have to cancel that event because I get a migraine? What if when I drive to this place, I can't drive home because I have a migraine, which of course
Mhm.
just amped it up. And it went from being something that I was getting, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 times a year to getting 3 times a month.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it, and at the time I didn't see the link between constantly being anxious and stressed about my migraines and having my body put in that mode where it can't heal and it can't return to equilibrium like it's designed
Yeah.
and therefore fueling it.
Yeah.
So to me,
Yeah.
I didn't notice that there was even a mind body link until coming across this understanding. And I was like, whoa, 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 you're telling me that I was revving my mind basically far more than it needed to be. And that was actually putting my body in a position where it was coming up with a very real symptoms. Because
Mhm.
my like that's what I hear from clients because I work with a lot of clients with anxiety and depression, and they say, well, these physical symptoms are not in my head. And I'm like, well, I'm not saying they're in your head.
Mm.
I'm saying that there's a very real link between what you're doing in your mind and what symptoms are manifesting in your body.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like we turn, because like when I think about when I got ill in '07, I said, oh well, it was thing, this virus or whatever it was that I got, that was the thing that looked like it was the thing that started it. But now I kind of thing, I can see that actually the seeds of so long ago, I had an MO of being in my head and worrying and being controlling and trying to get somewhere and pushing and high performance. And, if I went to the gym, I would train, extremely hard and harder than everybody else. And it was just like, I didn't realize that that is another form of stimulation of this fight or flight response. So we kind of live in this mode of operation. And then when we get this kind of infection or whatever it would be that starts off the process, or looks like it starts off the process, actually it's like the final straw. And the body goes, okay, I give up, I had enough, right? And so you really go downhill at that point. And then it's the thing that we've been doing for all our life that then gets turned against the state that we're now in. So we turn that controlling way of being and that overthinking way of being and, that anxiety process towards our sickness. Well, it's my job now to get myself out of my sickness. And of course, that's the thing that stimulates more of this fight or flight response that then takes us even further down. So before you know it, we're in this quagmire. We don't know how we really got there, and we've no idea how to get out.
Yeah. And exactly. And we're told by society, by well-meaning professionals, that it's up to us to fix how we're feeling. So it's up to us to feel better, to find the answer, to think positively, to, change our thinking. And the whole self-help movement is based around the idea that there's something wrong with you, and I hope you're smart enough to fix it. And what was revolutionary for me, because all of these years that I had anxiety, that's exactly what I was doing. I was reading self-help books. I was going to group therapy. I was going to counseling. I was doing all these things that was supposed to get rid of my anxiety. And it wasn't until I came across the principles and when I came across the principles, I didn't do it in a way of this is going to solve my anxiety. I had given up on having anxiety for life at that point. I was like, okay, I'm stuck. This is life. This is just my lot. But because I have a degree in philosophy, when I just after graduating stumbled across something that said, hey, did you know the mind is inside out and experience is created internally? I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, let me take a look at this. And so I came into this understanding super fascinated philosophically, but thinking this is not going to help me in life. It's not going to help me in relationships. It's not going to help me with anxiety. Like, this is just something kind of cool to study at the beach at sunset, expand your mind and, and didn't think there was any really practical implications to this. So so it was totally surprising to me, totally shocking when about 6 months after first coming across this, I just noticed that I wasn't anxious. And I kind of thought, okay, this is just a fluke. Like, don't get your hopes up. Like, you'll, in a week or two, you'll be back to your regular self that you've been your entire life. And it's almost like it dissolved. It's almost like it just ceased to be what it had always been, as prominent feature of my life. And so, the migraines were kind of a side effect of that. The anxiety resolving itself was a side effect of that. Everything seemed to kind of resolve itself when I started learning about the mind. But it's all too common, I think, for people to say, well, if I can't fix my experience, if I can't work my way to a better experience, I'm never going to feel better, because there's no such thing as kind of anxiety dissolving. There's no such thing as migraines vanishing after 10 years of having them without cause. And so what would you say to that, for if somebody, and I'm sure people do come to you and say, like, yeah, but John, you don't understand. Like, I do need to fix this. Like, I do need to feel better. I can't have these panic attacks. I can't be in the state that I'm in.
Yeah, I'll speak to what I heard. So I don't know if you noticed, I had a dropout of my internet.
Yeah, I noticed that you froze. I hope I didn't drop out too much. We'll see.
You did, but I heard some of it, and I can certainly speak to the question that you just asked me.
Okay.
Here's what I see from my own experience. I can only speak from that, but it looks to me like we are all looking to be okay and to have an experience of being okay. And we've got a million and one different ways that we make up that we've got to do something in order to experience that. And that for me is putting the cart before the horse. Um, I remember, I got distinctly suspicious about the way I saw the world when I started to have moments of just recognizing I was okay with myself as I was, you despite the fact that I had symptoms, despite the fact that there were things in my life that looked like they needed to be fixed. And with this understanding, I started to see, well, this is the problem, is that actually we're really caught in the illusion that the outside world is the thing that completes us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, we're already complete, and we're making up that there's a hole that needs to be filled. So to begin to see that actually it isn't a place that you get to externally that completes you. It's waking up to the fact that you are complete, and it's just an illusion created by the mind that gives you the experience of feeling like you're not whole.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as you start to see truth in that and see how that actually works, it undoes what I would call the desperation to get well and the desperation to get somewhere, which was, again, that was me. I've got to get somewhere, and constantly making up a new somewhere to get to, and then fighting and pushing my way to actually get there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same with this. Part of the recovery for me was recognizing that actually it was not necessary to be free of symptoms for me to experience that well-being. And actually, the irony of it was that the more I recognized that was true and saw how these principles created my experience of being alive, actually, I settled down. The thing that stopped me pushing, it stopped me trying to control so much, it stopped me trying to get somewhere. And the byproduct of that is that this fight or flight response in our body shuts down.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my experience. I stopped fighting to be well. And funnily enough, that allowed my body to go into a mode of healing and a mode of getting rid of the symptoms that I was experiencing. And it was remarkably quick for me. I mean, it happened within a matter of weeks of me having the insight. I hope that speaks to the question that you
No, that's perfect. No, it's because that's really what it comes down to. Like what I see all the time when I'm working with people with anxiety and depression is this idea that like, well, I can't feel like this, and there's so much resistance, and there's so much, fighting and desperation, and like my experience is not okay. And it very much looks to me like when we understand what's happening, it gives us a natural okayness with the human experience. It gives us a sense of, yeah, okay, I see what's going on at a deeper level such that it's not so scary.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you see this in your work with clients too, that like once we really start to understand what's happening and how safe our experience is, it does the heavy lifting. Just changing our relationship to what's happening is what causes transformation, even if we still have the same thinking or the same symptoms or the same, migraines. Like I definitely didn't learn the principles and then never have a migraine again. But there was this period where I had a completely different relationship to my migraines. Instead of having all of this fear and anxiety about it, I was like, well, I've survived all of them to date. So, they haven't killed me yet. So what if I can just show up, deal with what happens in the moment and be okay? And having that insight about, so I don't need a pre-plan. I can just kind of show up and deal with what's happening in the moment was kind of so instrumental in having a different relationship to it, such that when it showed up next time, I wasn't terrified of it happening. I was just like, okay, there's steps I'll take. Like if I'm driving, I'll call somebody to come pick me up, and I'll take an Advil and I'll go lie down in a dark room and I'll tough it out. And I know in the morning I'll feel better. And
Yeah.
I was able to then still have a few migraines that were totally different than all of the really suffering ones, because the pain and the suffering I see is what trips us up. It's
Yeah, I mean, the pain is something that I think we look to try and absolve ourselves of. And actually, that's like saying, I don't want to be human.
yeah.
Right? Because, as long, from what I see, pain is part of being human. You cannot have all the good stuff in life unless you're prepared to have a bit of pain as well. Because it's like saying, oh, well, I only want light. Well, you can't have light unless you have dark.
Mhm.
Can't have left without right or up without down. The two are needed in order for one to exist. So, seeing that as a truth of the human experience is one thing, but the suffering is when we resist that as a truth, from what I can see. So, yesterday, funnily enough, I was running a retreat called A Quiet Mind with my colleague, Nick. And we had a lot of people there with anxiety. And I was driving, I don't know if you know, but we're having, one of the worst winter spells in the UK at the minute that we've had in a very long time. So we've got snow everywhere. It's been like -8, and the UK can't cope with a tiny bit slow. So everything falls to pieces. So I was driving to her house and I found myself in heavy traffic, everything at a standstill. And all of a sudden I noticed I was anxious. And, my mind was making up all kinds of stuff about being stranded in the snow and all sorts of stuff. And I noticed how little impact it actually had on me. And for me, it was because I was just seeing what that feeling was made of. Like, oh, well, yeah, I got a lot of thinking right now. And so, of course, I'm feeling anxious. Oh, well, that won't, that's not data about what I've got to do. It's not
Mhm.
information. It's just a transient experience. And so I was able to just get on with what it was that I needed to do. Of course, I was still feeling the way I was feeling, but it just didn't occur to me that this was a problem in the way that it used to.
Mhm.
And I actually shared an analogy, and I can't take credit for this analogy. It's actually my colleague Karen that coined this one. But we talk about our feelings and our experience. We can talk about it in terms of a bus, right? So if you think about yourself as being a bus, well, that bus goes between bus stops, and at each bus stop a passenger gets on board. If you think of those passengers as thoughts, right, well, you stop at one bus stop and then the anxiety thought gets on, and then he goes and sits in his place, and whilst the bus is moving, you experience what it's like to have that passenger aboard the bus, right? Now, knowing the way buses work and knowing the way the mind works, if you're really cool with having the anxiety passenger on the bus, well, you kind of know at some point he gets off, right? So as the bus goes along, at some point he goes, "All right, I've reached my stop." So he gets off the bus, and that's no longer your experience.
Mhm.
Now, what most people with anxiety or depression do, from what I can see, and certainly this is what I did, is they're kind of told that feeling low or anxious is a problem,
Mhm.
right? So when the anxiety passenger gets on the bus, what do? Well, it's like a conductor gets up and goes to interview the anxiety passenger and says, "What are you doing here? And when are you getting off? And you shouldn't be on this bus. You should get off." Right now, all the while that we're interviewing the anxiety passenger, the bus is still moving, and other passengers are getting on the bus.
Mhm.
So you've got frustration and anger and all these other ones, and they get on the bus. But after a while, it starts getting really crowded in the bus because you haven't let the anxiety passenger off the bus. Right.
Mhm.
So if you do that long enough, not only does the anxiety passenger get quite smelly, but the bus gets quite heavy because all these other passengers are stacking up and can't get seats and can't get off. Right. So that for me then explains why the mind gets so busy, because we start to see aspects of our experience in a bad way. And so
Mhm.
start trying to do something with them. And of course, it revs us up. It makes us busy. It makes the pain into suffering.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you see, oh, well, actually, that's how it works. Oh, I don't need to interview that thought or do anything about it. And then he just gets off and leaves. Um,
Yeah, because like that's such a beautiful analogy, but it's good. Like it points to the heart of it, because our experience is meant to come in and go. It's meant to flow. It's meant to move. It's meant to be transient. And
Hmm.
the only difference, and this is something that I talk to my clients with anxiety about, is like, there are people who have a problem with anxiety. There are people who have a problem with depression. There are people who have a problem with anger. But it's all the same thing. It's all people taking one little kind of spectrum of what we're going to get as human beings and saying, this is not okay. It's not okay
Yeah.
to feel this.
Yeah.
And yet the same person will say, well, yeah, I don't mind when I'm angry. I know when I'm angry, that'll go away. That's fine. Or I know when I'm jealous that in two
Hmm.
seconds, I'm not going to be jealous. But when I'm anxious, oh, no, 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 no. That, like, I have to figure out what's causing that. I have to really work on it. I have to do something about it.
Yeah.
And that is just what keeps us stuck. It's like you said, it's like the passenger can't get off the bus and it wants to get off the bus. It's designed to get off the bus.
Hmm.
But it's our treating it like it's useful, relevant, important, dangerous kind of experience, not seeing how safe and irrelevant it is, that kind of keeps us stuck.
Yeah, we give it a meaning, and typically that meaning is, it means something about us as a person, or our worth, or our value, or it means something about our ability to navigate our life, or get somewhere, or be productive, or be a good parent, or
Mhm.
whatever. And then the irony is not seeing that we've made that meaning up and how untrue that meaning usually is. That's then what causes us to get into this loop of fighting our experience that then actually starts to impair our ability to do the things we want to do, or to be a good parent, or to even do like crazy acts. I mean, I remember when I went into a prison once, not because I was sentenced to a crime, I might add, but I got in to explore how this work was being done with inmates. And I remember one guy who was in for violent crime, and he started sharing how this understanding had impacted him over the last few weeks of exploring it. And he said before he came into the jail, he used to, whenever he used to get angry, his way of dealing with it was to beat people and hit them, right? Hence why he was in jail.
Yeah.
And he said one of the things that he'd learned was that actually, in seeing what we've just been talking about, actually, it was really just fine that he was angry, and he didn't need to do anything about it because it sorted itself out. So
Mhm.
he organically stopped hitting people and beating people up because he'd realized how benign that feeling of anger was and how it sorted itself out. And I heard that, honestly, it just moved me because I was like, wow, this is, I remember when I went to the jail and I felt so different when I went in. I was like, what have I got to share with these guys? And then I realized, oh, they're just subject to the same misunderstanding as me. And it just manifests differently, but it's the same thing underneath it all.
Mhm.
And it gave me such hope when I saw that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
that's really all it is it's the same thing manifesting in different ways. And I think because part of, like, we're so conditioned as a society to really care about the details and really make things personal and really, like, be kind of smart about our experience. And it's like, okay, but I think that all of that just kind of obscures that the exact same thing is going on for all 7 billion of us.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more normal and a lot more safe than we think it is. And knowing that, yeah, we're going to self correct, yeah, it's going to leave, is just, like, to me, that's made all the difference. It's like, because of course I still get anxious. Of course I still get depressed and low mood. Of course I still get all of that. The difference now is that I generally don't care because I know that it's going to take care of itself in time. So
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
keep doing what I'm going to do. And before I know it, I'm like, huh, I'm feeling completely different. Like,
Yeah.
how did that happen? I just certainly didn't do it. And that's kind of, I think, this has a spillover effect of, like, how a body is physically, that it starts to
Yes.
get healthier, sleep gets better, symptoms resolve themselves, all these things kind of take care of themselves in a way because, like we said, like, we're not making it harder than it needs to be by putting in a bunch of junk and really revving the system when it's trying to just slow down.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like when we resist those feelings, when we resist those symptoms, when we resist our lives, when we're caught in this idea that there's somewhere to get to, that is a chronic fight or flight response. there's one of my mentors. I saw a video on YouTube the other day by Bill Pettit, and
Mm.
he was saying that just 30 minutes a day of being in the stress response is enough to alter the gene expression of the body from one of health to one of disease. Well, I must have just lived most of my waking hours in that place. I mean, maybe I did it in my dreams too. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I, I certainly lived there a lot. Um, and it's fascinating as well, because one of the byproducts of this for me is the more I see this what I call the resilience of the system, and that I don't need to do anything to self-correct. Well, apparently it's made a world of difference in my work too,
Mm.
because now I find myself much more willing to play with things that might have looked scary before, because I see that the thing that I'm really up against is is not whether the thing goes well or badly. It's whether I can actually cope with whatever goes on in when I do the work. And the coping's actually got nothing to do with the work itself. It's got everything to do with seeing what we're talking about and how everything self-corrects in the mind. So it's
Mhm.
like, okay, yeah, I'll take that on, and let me see if I can do it. Let me see what comes through me. So what's the worst that's going to happen? You know, I'll feel bad if I don't pull it off. Okay, I can deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. That's kind of the same with me. Is that I've started to realize like the thing that I'm afraid of is feeling bad. But what do I know about feeling bad? It's thought in the moment, which means that
Hmm.
it's going to go and it's not tied to the outside circumstances as much as it looks like it is. And I know it looks like it is. Like it looks like, well, no, I'm feeling that failure. I'm feeling that rejection. But it's like, no, 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 no. You're feeling thought in the moment. That's how it works.
Yeah.
So if you can just not, stop that passenger and interview him and just let him get off the bus, he's going to do that. And you're just going to be back to being fine. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's great. And this kind of like, especially what you talked about with Bill, because I've heard him say that too about that it is us kind of it really indulging in our thinking that kind of changes the expressions of hormones and genes and stuff. And often when I talk to people about this idea that we are innately healthy and well,
Mm.
there's always a question of like, well, what about cancer? Well, what about disease? Well, what about disability? Well, what about, like, and so I'm just wondering, what does that look like to you? Because I'm sure that you've heard it too when we talk about the fact that human beings are innately healthy and well and designed to self correct. And people will say, well, I don't see that because why would we have disease? Why would we, um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what does it look like to you?
Yeah. I'll share what I've seen for myself. So, I suppose firstly I should caveat everything that I'm saying about what I've seen so far has been personal experience within the context of CFS,
Mm-hmm.
and the very few people that I've been able to work with so far. Um, but I've also been fascinated in seeing some of the other byproducts of doing that work within the context of CFS, and then other pathologies that people have shared, afterwards with me. I didn't even know they had. So, I remember when we did the research work, um, there was one person with primary autoimmune disorder who found that her blood work for her immune markers had been going up. And the doctor had been asking her what she'd been doing differently. And she said, all I've been doing is engaging in this conversation. And that's it. And she'd been taking 28, I think it was 28 years of IG infusions in her blood. And there's one thing that they cannot, one of those IG, I'm not an expert in this, but there's one of those IG markers, IgA, that can't be synthesized, artificially. And so they were still measuring her levels of that, and they found that they'd started to increase. So the body had actually started making more of it, despite the fact that she had this autoimmune disorder. We had another person with psoriasis who started telling me that it had gone away. Um, so I'm certainly seeing the possibility for this within the context of health on its own. But I don't know, and I'm not sure that I could say hand on heart that this is a cure, right? I would never want to say that to
Yeah.
anybody. I think for me, what I see is that sometimes people get sick, um, and Sometimes babies get cancer.
Yeah.
People are born with disabilities. Um, I certainly am not saying that there's, oh, well, if you get this understanding, everybody gets well of everything. It doesn't
Yeah.
seem like that's true at all. It seems to me that what we're really looking at here is something that's beyond the physical. So we're pointing people to a truth which is spiritual in nature about who they really are. And it seems to me that when people glimpse that, they're actually glimpsing what they're really looking for. They're seeing who they really are. And that trumps healing. That trumps getting rid of the scary disease. Now, it does seem to be true that sometimes as people get this sort of stuff, they seem to improve physically, but I don't know that that's always going to be the case. And it
Mm-hmm.
certainly isn't a replacement for any of the other medical treatments that are out there and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, is it possible to have well-being with physical disease? Well, yeah, I certainly experienced it. Other people do as well. But are people going to continue to get diseases and illnesses? Well, yeah, maybe that is true. And maybe it's actually not a problem if we start to see more of what life is and who we really are within the context of that. Maybe that just becomes another experience of spirit being alive. Right?
Mm. No, that's
Uh,
beautiful. That's really beautiful. Can you say more about that? Like, what do you mean about how it's just not a problem? Because I hear people say all the time, like, that's the worst thing that could possibly happen is me getting
Yeah.
sick.
So I'm going to caveat this. So if someone came and said to me, or if I found out tomorrow that there was something seriously wrong with me or any member of my family, I'm not probably going to be all zen about it and go, oh yeah, it's all fine and yeah, no problem. And no, not at all. I would
Yeah.
very much have my human experience around it. But for me, I guess what I'm pointing to is what's the game? What's actually going on in life? Well, it looks to me like there is this deeper intelligence to life, which we can kind of observe its effects. I mean, for me, it's manifesting as the thoughts that come to my mind, or my heart being beaten in every moment, or the drink that I've just had, the cup of tea being digested by my body. John isn't doing that. There's something that's doing that, in the same way there's something that grows trees and make the sun rise and that sort of thing. And it seems to me that what life seems to be is that intelligence, call it spirit or God or whatever you want to, is having an experience of being alive, picking up different forms, and those forms are part of the expression of its infinite potential to create. And sometimes it looks to our thinking beautiful, and sometimes it looks to our thinking as being horrible, cruel, or evil. But actually, what is it that gives us relief from the suffering is seeing, well, what's behind all of that is that creative potential, that one thing experiencing being alive. And it's the analogy that comes to mind. I don't know if you have this where you live, but in the UK, we have this thing called Punch and Judy. You ever heard of
Mm,
Punch and Judy?
I haven't though.
Kind of see it's like a puppet show, and you see it at like summer fairs and things like that. And I don't really know what the origins of it, and I haven't seen it a very long time. But as I recall, the essence of it is that there's two characters called Punch and Judy, and what I seem to remember them doing is basically beating themselves up,
Mm,
right? So they kind of hit each other and say things to each other, and it's meant to be kind of comic. Now, if you look at Punch and Judy and you see what's on the surface and what you see through the screen, well, you see two people that apparently are beating each other up and doing silly things to each other. But when you look beneath the screen, or if you were able to walk behind it, you'd see actually there's one guy behind that screen puppeteering both of these characters and having a game.
mhm.
Well, it looks to me like that's what life is. That experience of us being alive, that sense that we're all separate, well, we're not. We're actually being lived by that intelligence, and it's manifesting in different forms and playing the game of being alive. Um, and for me, there's some solace in that, because it's not that I have to perfect my life to be okay.
Mhm.
It's that that is what it is to be okay, is to wake up to that. And the irony of it is that the more we wake up to that, the less we've got to struggle to get somewhere. But actually, apparently, we're much better at getting somewhere,
Yeah.
because now we're in alignment with the actual creative force behind life. And it knows how to unfold galaxies.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of knows how to manage my life then.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like that was huge for me to see too. It was like, wait. If this intelligence can, make kittens, heal cuts, take care of everything, weather-wise, galaxy-wise, cosmic-wise, all the physical laws of the universe, everything.
Mm,
And why do I think that it's on me to make myself have healthier behaviors or make myself get somewhere in life or make myself be creative or all of these
yeah,
things that like I just sort of see like, whoa. Maybe the intelligence behind life can help me paint. Pretty sure that that's not a harder demand than all of the other stuff it's already doing.
yeah.
And yeah, and it's just like what I saw for myself recently that was interesting is so for the past 5 years, I've had it in my head that I should have a yoga practice. Like that would be a good thing to do is I should, practice yoga. And I did it with a very kind of like, this would make my life better, so I should do it. And I tried for years to make it consistent. Never happened. So I would kind of put punishment and reward systems like, oh, if you do your 2 practices a week and you do it consistently, then you can get this. And if you don't, then, no cake for you. Like I kind of devised these systems that I thought, okay, this is going to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so at the beginning of this year, 2018, and everyone sets resolutions, and I'm not a big resolution person, but the one thing that I was kind of curious about is one of my favorite yoga teachers started a 30-day yoga challenge.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, like I'm not going to stick with the 30 days. I know that. I've been trying this for 5 years. I can't even, get to 3 times a week. But if I only just do it for the first few days, then whatever. It's better than, because at the time I was feeling a bit under the weather, and I'm like, it would be good to kind of take care of the body a bit.
Yeah.
It's March 1st and I haven't missed a day. And if you ask me, well, how is it that you're suddenly effortlessly doing yoga daily when you tried for 5 years to, make it happen? I would say, like, I honestly don't know. I honestly can't tell you why I wake up every day just like, it's almost like I'm not making the decision to do it. I just find myself doing it every day.
Yeah.
And it's the strangest thing. And again, it goes back to like, well, it has to be this larger intelligence, this larger wisdom kind of guiding me to do it, because I sure as hell am not, I'm not forcing myself. I'm not using reward and punishment. I'm not really doing anything. I just find myself going about my day and then saying, okay, it's time to do yoga. And I look on the playlist for what the practice is and I do the practice. There's no thinking, there's no resistance. And yeah, now it's been 60 days of a daily practice. And I'm like, where did that come from? And so I guess the question I have for you is like, do you see, especially in your work with CFS patients or with anyone who's kind of struggling with wanting to cultivate healthier behaviors or get their sleep and, get exercise, all of these things,
Yeah.
can we rely on wisdom to kind of take care of that? Or does it still seem like, no, there are some things that we kind of should cultivate or need to cultivate as healthy behaviors? Whether it's diet, sleep, exercise, anything, just like, is it on us? Or do you see that a lot of people just have what I had, where they're like, I just find myself going to bed earlier, I just find myself putting healthier food in my body, I just find myself exercising.
Mm. I mean, I think one of the things that's happened for me is very much a relaxing of what I think would be best.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm not against any of those things that you just listed. I mean, I'm no expert on them. I just think that there's no one size fits all. And the thing is that the thing that seems to trump it is what do we know from our own wisdom in the moment that seems to be right?
Mm-hmm.
I was just reflecting on as you were talking about your yoga practice. I mean, when I did the CFS study, apparently, someone asked me, "Oh, well, how did you go about doing that research and putting it all together?" And I kind of laughed and I said, I think you're going to be a bit underwhelmed at the answer when I tell you that I kicked and screamed my whole way through it, but apparently something bigger than me wanted me to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, life didn't seem to really care that I had all kinds of thinking about it and all sorts of resistance to doing it. Apparently, I would get up. Apparently, I would do the work. Apparently, I would show up to it. Apparently, I did this thing for an entire year, kicking and screaming and moaning about it,
Yeah.
And I think about it in just terms of basic things like, if I wake up in the middle of the night and need to go to the bathroom, I'm not particularly motivated to get out of the bed because it's usually pretty cold and the last thing I want to do is leave my warm duvet.
Yeah.
Apparently, I don't wet myself. Apparently, I go to the bathroom despite my mind's protestations.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something inside of us that seems to know, right? In the same way that there's something that seems to know how to manage my metabolism and energy and all that sort of stuff. I mean, for me, again, when I think about the CFS stuff, I had been told that I needed to manage all of these things to be okay. Oh, well, you've got to monitor for the symptoms and make sure you're not making them worse and, manage your energy and put it into bite-sized chunks and make sure you have enough naps and rest breaks. And I was like, wow, when I really started to see what was going on, that process looked to me as crazy as trying to manage my digestion. Like, I can't do that. I mean, imagine I go and eat my meal and then try and control the process that does all of that. How are you going to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was what I was doing with my energy and my symptoms and everything. And that's what I see time and time again. And of course, I can't give this advice to people. I don't give it to people as advice. I just share that from my perspective, it doesn't seem to make sense to me that we would try and do that.
Mm-hmm.
And my experience of doing it is that actually the level of anxiety that we get to in trying to do all of that stuff seems to actually make us sicker. It seemed to give me more symptoms for the very fact that I was worrying about whether I was using too much energy or whether I'd had my nap or whether I'd done this or whether I'd done that. It was just all conditions again on my well-being. I'm not sure if that answered your question,
No,
actually.
it did. Yeah, it did because it's pointing to the fact that it's our believing that it's on us that makes it harder.
Yeah.
It's because for me, like whether it's yoga, healthy eating, getting more sleep, the minute I just don't really care, the minute I'm like, I'll sleep when I sleep, I'll put whatever food in my body, a part in my body, I'll, just do whatever. It seems to just naturally be healthier for me. And it's not like, and it's a weird paradox that like when I'm trying to have better sleep or I'm trying to eat healthier, I'm trying to, have these good behaviors that I should do to be well.
Yeah.
I'm just getting in my own way. And it's as soon as I'm like, okay, I give up. I'll eat what I eat. I'll sleep when I sleep. Like, I don't really care. That it's just like, it's almost like the system kind of like the wisdom kicks in and it's just like, okay, I'm going to guide you to health. I'm going to guide you to making decisions that I think, I don't know, support my best interest. I don't really know if that's how I put it, but like, it just seems to be a kind of natural unfolding that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember someone telling me, I don't know who this was. So this is very much a story that I heard secondhand, but I remember someone telling me that, when they were first on their journey of learning about the principles, they had this whole regimen of being really, really tough on themselves about their fitness. Mm-hmm. And they run every day and they absolutely had to do their run to be fit. And I remember them telling, this other person that they'd had some blood tests done or something. And the doctor had pointed to some markers that were off and that were, I think they were basically stress markers from what I understand that suggested that actually this person was not in as tip-top shape as they actually thought they were really. And then this person had gone and learned about the principles and they'd actually put on a bit of weight and stopped being so tough with themselves about their exercise regimen. And then when they got their blood test tested again, they're actually found to be healthier than where they were before.
Yeah.
And that for me really speaks to my experience, because I was working so hard to be well. One of the other tests I had done was my nutritional status, and I supplemented like crazy,
Hmm.
right? So I had a supplement for everything. And so when they tested my nutritional status, I was not short of anything. And it made me realize, well, how can I how can I be taking every supplement under the sun and being really careful to do everything I can to be healthy? And yet apparently I'm symptomatic as anything. And I seem to be really unhealthy. And for me, the analogy that sometimes I talk to people about is, the analogy of a leaky bucket,
Yeah.
right? So we're really good at filling up the bucket with supplements and medicines and all sorts of things. And there's definitely a place for all of that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. But with people like me, there's a leak in the system, right? And the leak in the system is actually the way we've learned to try and fight against life to try and get somewhere. And it's stimulating this fight or flight response, which is actually creating a breakdown on the body. Of course, one way of dealing with that is to be really, yeah, I'm really, really up on my nutrition, and I'll do my exercise and I'll do this and I'll do that. But all of that is an attempt to fill a bucket with a leak.
Yeah.
And what I've seen is, with myself anyway, is that the more I seem to not live in this place of stress and pushing and striving all the time, apparently the bucket's pretty good at filling itself up. And that there's much less that I need to do to be okay physically and mentally and emotionally than I actually thought. Not to say that any of those other things are bad. I mean, I still take supplements from time to time, and if a doctor gives me medicine and that sort of thing, well, I probably just take it.
Yeah.
But I see that this is just like it's like a missing piece of the puzzle. It's like a foundation. We
Mhm.
keep building our houses on really shaky foundations that are built of stress and resistance and fight. Well, what if we address that bit and then see it might actually be a bit easier to build the house?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, exactly. Because, like, it's so true. If you're building on a foundation that's always kind of, on sand, it's always sinking out from under you, then no amount of like putting more sand on it is going to stop the fact that it's going to do that. Like,
yeah.
but the minute you're like, okay, I like, and for me, I just think that having an understanding of the mind, like George has a quote about it being kind of penicillin and it goes where it's needed. And I think
Hmm.
it's so true because we can't say, well, I have this specific thing that I would like different in my life. Therefore, if I know the principles, it'll take care of it. Like that to
Yeah,
me doesn't look like it's going to works like that at all.
I agree. Yeah.
But it looks like we get an understanding of how the mind works, and all of a sudden, things kind of take care of themselves. Things resolve themselves, and whether it's health, whether it's anxiety, whether it's symptoms, whether it's like you said, business or creativity or relationships, it's kind of like, huh, I didn't really think that that was built on an unsolid foundation, but I'm starting to see that now that I understand how the mind works, that actually was the foundation underneath that problem. And it was because I saw it the most in relationships kind of right away. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. People are doing the best they can. Like that
Mm.
to me was kind of mind blowing. And suddenly, what other people did stopped looking like attacks on me and started looking like very human qualities of them. And it
Yeah.
totally changed how I related to them just automatically because
Yeah.
the foundation that was under the relationship was no longer they can cause me to feel bad and they're intentionally doing that to me. It was,
Hmm.
well, they're in thought, I'm in thought. So we're always kind of playing this dance with other people. And sometimes it's not going to be ideal, but most of the time it's pretty great. It's a pretty good gig to be in general. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and it's just totally different when we see like, hey, what's foundational about this? Like, what are we building this on?
Yeah.
And yeah, things take care of it.
I agree. I mean, when I think about the relationship with my wife, like it's actually so much easier for the knowledge, but it might seem a little unromantic in some ways, but essentially I'm not in relationship to my wife. I'm only ever in relationship to my perception of her moment to moment to moment. So in those moments when we're having a fight, because it does happen,
Yeah.
when we have a fight, to know that I'm not actually fighting with her. I'm having a fight with my mind's perception of her in the moment, and that's quite likely to change.
Mm-hmm.
So having seen that, it means that actually when and if we have a fight, it's sort of amusing,
Mm-hmm.
because there's this part of you that's going, you do know that you're not really having a fight with her, don't you? And it's like, no, I really am having a fight with her. And I might get quite indignant about it for a bit. But, there's just this suspicion that starts to arise where you go, no, it can't be her that's making you feel the way that you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that changes everything, because people get divorced for those kind of reasons.
Yeah.
And when you realize, oh, your wife can't make you feel something that's inside of you. Oh, okay. So divorcing doesn't seem like a very good option then.
Yeah.
Why would I do that? Now, the reality as I see it is exactly what you said. When you start to see this, so many of the things that look like a problem just they go away. But there are parts, as I see it, of our thinking that can sometimes look solid. So no matter how much of an understanding you have of these principles, we're having a human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And part of being human is to forget, and it is to believe our thinking and think that it's true. And I have areas of those. That's why I said, if my kids got ill or something happened to my wife or anything like that, there's no part of me that's going to go, oh yeah, it's just your thinking. And like, no, I'll be upset, I'll be sad, I'll resist it, and actually, I don't have a problem even with that,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just part of being human and riding around in this experience. And so I don't want people to think that, you get this understanding and then everything kind of works. It's like, yeah, lots of stuff does fall away as being a problem, but then you still have your humanness.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't trade that for the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a beautiful note to end on. So thank you so much, John. I am so grateful that you took the time to share your wisdom, because honestly, there's just something about hearing you speak that like just the depth of feeling that you bring that just always made me like, wow, John is just fantastic to talk to. So thank you so much. And if people want to get a hold of you or learn more about the work you do, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, so they can go to my website, which is breakthroughthat.com.
Awesome. And I'll put that in the description below so that people can click over. So thank you
Oh,
so, so much. And
not
this
at all. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
great. Take care. Bye.
See ya.